I'm excited to kick off this webinar here today and welcome you all to Safer's Picks, recent FME enhancements with big everyday impact. Now, this webinar is a bit of a special format today. It's been quite a while since we've had a more of a lightning talk style webinar where we get to feature 5 different panelists on our Safer team taking you through different FME enhancements that they have picked out and selected to share with you today. So excited to pass things over to the team to introduce each of themselves briefly. We'll start things off with Mark. I'll pass things over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Warren. I'm one of the pre-sales support specialists here at SAFE.
Awesome. And Divya.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Divya. I am the tech support specialist for FME Forum.
Hey guys, I'm Donald. I've been with SAFE for about 2 years and I'm a technical support specialist also on the forum side.
Hi, I'm Crystal. I'm also a technical support specialist on the forum side.
And I'm Sienna. I'm a customer solutions specialist.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, so a lot of knowledge across the team to be shared with us today. And speaking of which, if you do have any questions as the team is sharing today, please do get those into the questions tab as we go along. We'll have time dedicated at the end for some live questions. The chat, keep letting us know where you're tuning in from. If you have any comments or insights you want to share as we go along, feel free to use that bar as well. The react button on the bottom middle, feel free to share any emoji reactions with us. We love to see how you are all reacting to the content. It fuels us as presenters on the stage here. And then that help button on the bottom left. So if you do have any audio or video issues during the webinar, that button has 4 simple steps to take. The first of which is just a simple page refresh. All right, so at this point, I will prompt our presenters to turn off their webcams so we can save on some bandwidth as we go along here. Perfect, thanks team. All right, so to kick off our webinar today, I'm going to take us through a very quick intro to the why behind this webinar and what you can expect to get out of it, as well as a quick overview of FME for anyone that might be newer to our platform. From there, I'll be excited to hand things over to Mark for our first lightning talk of the session. He's going to be showing you how dynamic parameters in FME flow apps can let you build new kinds of workflows and apps that used to be very hard to pull off before recent updates. Next up, Divya is going to be showing us the external Python editor and how you can script and debug in your own Python IDE. Then Donald is going to walk us through the new FME Forum canvas, as well as parameter annotations for a smoother, more consistent workspace building process. After that, Sienna is going to share some FME Forum delighters. So these will include small UI enhancements that add a little bit of surprise and enjoyment as you build out your workflows. And then finally, Crystal is going to speak on the external browser authentication in FME Forum, which is going to help you keep authentication aligned with today's best security practices. Then I'll be wrapping us up with some resources that the team has pulled together based on their various segments, as well as providing you with next steps. And then we should have about 15 minutes at the end here for answering any of your questions live. So please do feel free. Of course, these are lightning talk style segments. And so you might have some follow-up questions. So if you do have any questions as we go along, please don't be shy. We will be sure to address those both as we go. I'm sure we'll be able to get to some, and then also we'll have that live question period at the end. Introducing today's topic here. FME, of course, keeps getting better. We're constantly making updates and changes. So today we hope that you can join us to discover some of these small updates that are making a big impact on real workflows that can really streamline your day-to-day. If you are newer to our platform, just to provide you a quick snapshot of FME, we do offer flexible deployment options. FME Form is the authoring environment where you build your data integration workflows, and then automation is provided in FME Flow, which is deployed on-premise or in your private cloud. And then we also offer FME Flow deployed in a fully hosted cloud environment called FME Flow Hosted. Lastly, FME Realize allows you to experience your data in the real world in real time. We first started out at SAFE very focused on GIS. And then over the years, we responded to our customers' needs. We now support over 500 different data types in FME. And so whether you are looking to connect your 3D, CAD, XML, BIM, cloud data, you name it, our goal is to enable you to use your data where, when, and how it's needed, regardless of what the source might be. Without further ado, I will hand things over to Mark to take us through dynamic parameters in FME Flow Apps as our first lightning talk here. Take it away, Mark.
All right, so we're going to get into the first feature that we're going to be highlighting today, which is the new dynamic parameters in Flow Apps, which was added in 2025.2. So these are new settings in Flow Apps that were added to give you the capability of data-driven parameters whenever the Flow app is launched. That way you can pull data from external sources and use those as the options in your parameters. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. One of them is getting the parameters and putting them into a JSON schema, which loads into the app. And that JSON can either come from a workspace using the data streaming service or through a URL, such as one of your APIs that is sending that configuration to the app to load up. Another way is with the URL-based configurations where you're actually adding a query string to the Flow Apps URL, which then uses that to determine what is loaded in your parameters. So what that looks like in practice is you've got your JSON schema that defines how the parameters look and how their options are set up. Like this case where this parameter has a default value with different choices. And these were all generated through that workspace or your external process that sends the data through a URL to the Flow app. And we also have an article that guides you through this, but we're going to walk through this demo now. So over in FME Flow, opening up my Flow app, you can see that there's a new section for dynamic parameter configurations. This is where you can enable all those settings that we just talked about, as well as a guide that walks you through the schema requirements and different use cases for dynamic parameters so that you can learn how to set up and structure the JSON that is going to load those parameter options to the end user. There's also a section for being able to test out different types of schemas based on the parameters in your Flow app and to see how that needs to be structured. And if you're using URL-based configurations, this is where you can paste the JSON schema to see how that URL is going to look. As you can see right now, I have it enabled to configure at launch, and it is going to be pulling the parameter information from a workspace using the data streaming service. And my helper workspace is here, which I can also test run just to verify that it is pulling back the different options that I want to make sure the Flow app is going to be loading to the end user. But let's take a look at the workspace that the Flow app is actually running. In here, you can see that this is a workspace that is going to be making requests with different options for the end user to filter results based on queries to a database with utility service requests. You can see here we've got some codes for the different service types. The service areas are actually empty. We're going to be dynamically populating that based on another data set. And you can see we have some statuses and customers, but let's say this flow app is working with some data that is frequently changed. And these types of values, we want to make sure that they're always up to date. So if the database changes and we have new service type codes, I want that to be reflected in the flow app without having to go in here and edit these parameter choices every time that happens. And that is where that helper workspace comes into play. So this is the workspace that is going to be generating that JSON schema, which loads all the different options to the end user based on the most recent version of those data sets. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling from service areas, getting the names of those service areas, and then I'm going to be generating an array of choices using the list builder to then create the display and the value, and then also adding the name of the parameter that these choices are going to be assigned to. But you're not restricted to editing choices. If all you're doing is modifying just, let's say, like a text or a date parameter, and you just want to automatically calculate something that goes in there, then you can also totally do that as well. But in this case, I'm generating a list of options. And the output is going to look like this, where that JSON that comes out is going to have that array of options for each parameter. You can see there's different objects for the different parameters, along with optional default values if you like. And you can see that these will be the choice display versus value options, as well as here where we've got those service areas where we don't have a default value and we have the options available here. But as mentioned before, these are for choice parameters. If you're just working with a simple parameter that doesn't require these, you will not need to add this into the output. In this case, I'm writing it to JSON, which is why I'm also using the list builder to then build those arrays. But if you are more comfortable using the JSON templater to generate your results, you're totally welcome to do that as well. So if we go into the Flow app with this helper workspace now set up, if I open up the app, you'll see that it loads for a moment, grabs the most recent data, and loads in the service types and all those options that were pulled from the REST service, as well as the statuses. But let's talk about that scenario where the database is updated and a new service type code is added. We want that to be reflected in the Flow app. So if we go into Snowflake, where that table is, and we add a new code for fire water supplies, that code is added. If I refresh the flow app, it's going to refresh and pull the most recent copy of all that data. And you can see that now we have that new option available. So this is really highlighting that live data capability and making sure your end users are always given the most up-to-date options whenever they're opening your flow app. So the key takeaways from this talk was to showcase how this new functionality gives you live data sources to populate your FME flow app parameters. And this way you can either pre-configure your parameters using the URL, or you can have an external data set to feed into the app to make sure your users are always working the most recent options. And now we'll pass it over to Divya for her talk.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. The second feature that we'll be highlighting is the external editor for Python in FME. Most of you are probably familiar with the FME community. It is a place where users share ideas, ask questions, and vote on features that they'd like to see in FME. This feature is the result of a highly voted idea on community asking for a better Python editing experience. As Python scripts grow more complex, the built-in editor makes it harder to explore functions and understand how code fits together. So for this feature, we focused on integrating FME with Python editors that users already rely on, rather than trying to build those capabilities ourselves. The next step is to see how this integration actually works inside FME. As I mentioned earlier, one of the main challenges with the built-in scripting experience is that it's hard to explore the available Python modules or functions as you're writing the code. What this feature enables is the ability to open the Python code in an external editor directly from FME using two supported editors, Visual Studio Code and PyCharm. To put this into context, I will walk through launching an external editor from a Python caller and show how you can navigate code, view type hints, and make edits using tools you already work with. As a result, this will help reduce context switching and make working with Python feel much smoother. All right, now let's jump into the demo. So I have Workbench 2025.2 open here, and I have added a Python caller. Let's open the Python caller. Normally, you would write and edit the scripts directly inside this editor, and you can still do that, but you'll notice there's now an external editor button available. When I click on the external editor button, FME will check whether I have already configured an editor. If I haven't set this up yet, I'm prompted to choose one of the supported options, that is Visual Studio Code or PyCharm. You'll notice that the executable paths are pre-populated. For the paths to be pre-populated, you'll have to make sure the editors are downloaded and installed on your computer. Now, you could customize these paths, but we recommend to use the preset ones. Once you click on Save, it will launch the external editor. In this case, I selected VS Code. While we wait for this to load, let's go back to FME. You'll notice a new modal window has opened, which provides more information on what's going on. This window stays open while the editor is running, and it will close once the external editor window is closed. Now, let's move over to VS Code. You may be prompted to trust the files by the external editor application. I'll go ahead and click on Trust. Here, you'll see all the things you'd normally expect when working with VS Code. For example, I can control click on FME and see all of the FME files. This makes it much easier to explore what's available, especially when you're working with functions or classes you haven't seen before. Once you start making edits, you can get things like type hints. So if I make an edit here, I can hover over it and see what it takes. It looks like it takes two strings, so I'll type demo and test. You can also import libraries that are in FME's Python installation. So deep diff is a good example of one that's not normally installed on your local system, but it is installed in FME's Python. So I'll go ahead and add that in. You'll also notice the script name starts with temp, and if you hover on the file, you'll notice that it is located in a temp folder. So the temp folder will be created on the path specified in the FME temp environment variable. If I open the temp folder, you can see the Python folder created here with a unique hash value for the folder name. All right, now I'll go ahead and save my edits before closing the editor. Back in FME, you'll see a notification banner that says the script has been updated. If we click on the external editor button again, it will launch the editor that was configured. If we want to change the default editor, we can go to Utilities, FME Options, then under Workbench Settings, scroll down to Text Editor Options. If we restore defaults, the default editor will be set back to none. And that's what the external editor workflow looks like in practice. Let's go ahead and wrap up with a few key takeaways. One important clarification, since this often comes up, is that the external editor is for editing only. Running the code in the external editor, it might result in errors, so it is recommended to run the script in FME Workbench for testing and debugging purposes. This feature is available in all the places where Python can be authored. Apart from Python caller, it is also available in Python creator, scripted parameter values, and the Python startup and shutdown scripts. If you want more details about this feature, we do have a knowledge base article that walks through everything in more detail. Please feel free to check that out. With that said, I'll pass it on to Donald.
Thank you, Divya. That was great. Very interesting, very useful information. For me, I'm excited to talk about the FME form canvas upgrade and the new inclusion of parameter annotations. With the FME form canvas upgrade, one of the quieter but really impactful changes is the refreshed iconography. At first glance, it might seem cosmetic, but it actually makes a big difference in day-to-day use. The new icons are cleaner, more consistent, and much easier to spot, which means you can find what you need faster and spend less time hunting around the canvas. On top of that, everything now feels more cohesive across the platform, giving FME a modern, unified look that matches how powerful the tool really is. It's one of those updates you don't realize you needed until you start using it yourself. Through deliberate design choices such as rounded corners and a harmonized color palette, you can craft workspaces that not only look more appealing, but also promote a sense of calm and focus. Another one of those easy to miss but really handy updates is the parameter annotations. They let you add notes directly to parameters so you can explain why something exists and not just what it does. That's great for future you, but it's even better when you're sharing workspaces with teammates or handing something over. It makes workspaces easier to understand, easier to maintain, and saves a lot of what does this do again kind of moments. So let's jump into the demo right now. For this demo, I want to highlight a set of improvements that are easy to miss because they're not a single headline feature, but they make a big difference every time you open FME. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the new updated layout, but let's show a comparison of what it was like before we made changes. So as you can see here, this is our old canvas. So this is anything from 2023 and below. I'm sure many of you have seen this before and are familiar with it. Looking back at it now, it seems a little outdated and, if we're being honest, maybe a bit clunky. And now here's the new updated canvas. At first glance, it still feels very much like FME, and that's intentional, but there's a lot of careful thinking behind what's changed. One of the main goals behind this redesign was focus. We recognized that the more we enable users to work uninterrupted, the more productive they can be. So instead of making things louder or flashier, the new canvas is about being quieter, more intentional, and guiding your attention only when it's needed. So let's start with the navigator on the left. In the older canvas, you might notice more color variation, even when nothing actually needs your attention. In the new canvas, the navigator icons only use red when something is genuinely incomplete. So like, for example, this could be from an incomplete transformer, or maybe it's a required parameter. If everything is valid, the navigator stays visually calm. Now we look at the toolbar at the top. In the new design, green is reserved for one very specific meaning. It only appears when you want to run a translation or when the translation is running. That means when you see green, something is happening right now. And when you don't, the toolbar stays neutral and out of your way. Another subtle but important change is a red warning icon only appears on incomplete transformers. You're no longer being warned about things that don't actually need action, which reduces that constant low level something might be wrong feeling. This wasn't just a visual refresh. The redesign was informed by an extensive internal audit and direct feedback from the FME community. How people actually use the canvas, where the attention gets pulled, and where frustration creeps in. At the same time, we know that comfort matters, especially for experienced users. So while this design moves FME forward, it's meant to feel like a natural extension of the FME you already know. There are a few really important things that didn't change, and this is deliberate. We did not change the semantic use of color. Red still means incomplete. We kept colors from the same families for readers, writers, and transformers. just easy to distinguish between them, and you don't have to relearn what objects represent. This is a big importance for us. Visually, you'll also notice the canvas just feels a bit more crisp and relaxed. Things like softer, rounder corners, a more harmonized color palette, cleaner spacing between objects. These aren't just aesthetic choices, they help reduce visual fatigue, especially during long authoring sessions. None of these changes stop you from doing what you've always done in FME. The result is a workspace that feels unmistakably like FME, but one that supports focus and flow much better. One last thing I'd love to show is the new parameter annotations. So when working on larger projects and your workspace is full of different transformers, it's so important to keep notes of everything, making it easier to understand what does what and where it does it. So parameter annotations is a helpful addition that allows you to explain why a parameter exists, not just what it does. If you have any parameters that need explaining, for example, an expression or formula, we now allow the ability to include a note, as you can see here. This helps with any confusion on what exactly you might be trying to achieve. It also helps with sharing workspaces amongst team members, and also with being able to add notes to your parameters allows a clear explanation of everything. Okay, so to wrap up my section, let's quickly run through some key takeaways. So for the FME form canvas upgrade, so the user will get an enhanced experience. A cleaner, more consistent interface makes things easier to learn and quicker to use. So users spend less time figuring things out and more time getting work done. There's a stronger, unified brand. So using the same visual style across all FME products helps everything feel connected and instantly recognizable as FME. And it reduces the cognitive load. So less scanning for problems, there's going to be fewer false visual alarms, and clearer signals when something actually needs attention. And then for the parameter annotations, we have better documentation, so you can add clear, specific notes right where decisions are made directly inside the parameter dialogues. We have cleaner workspaces, so the annotations stay out of the way and only appear when you open the relevant dialogue, so your canvas doesn't get too cluttered. And then you have, of course, easier to understand workflows. Having notes exactly where they matter makes it much easier to follow what's happening and why, especially in the more complex workflows. So from here, I'd like to pass it to Sienna.
All right, thank you. So let's talk about FME form delighters. Now you might be asking yourself, what is an FME form delighter? Typically, when we talk about FME releases, we're most likely to talk about the big ticket features, something like a new transformer, a major performance gain, or some kind of headline integration. But with every major release, we also like to include things called delighters. Delighters are the small but intentional changes that we make that don't always make the release headlines. However, they do shape the day-to-day experience of using FME. These are the improvements that help you smooth out common workflows, reduce friction, and make interactions feel more intuitive, all within FME. So where do these delighters come from? A lot of these come from user feedback, whether that's through a support case or directly through the community. If you haven't seen it before, I'd highly recommend that you take a look at our ideas page on the community. Here you can choose to write up your ideas on how we could potentially improve FME. Once these ideas get enough traction via votes, they will automatically be reviewed by the product management team. Well, with that, let's go on and talk about some delighters we've actually implemented. So we've implemented some work to help you easily navigate tunnels. I don't know if everyone here knows what a tunnel is, but picture it as a way to hide your connections within a workspace, especially if you have a lot of connections and connections perhaps in different areas of your workspace, and having a line running through the workspace it doesn't look as good as hiding that connection. For that, you could use something like a tunnel. Well, we made an update, so now you can right-click on an object and use the pan upstream or pan downstream option to select where you'd like to pan up or down to. And I'll show this in the next video. So as you can see here, we have a video, and I can right-click and I can show my connections. This was the old method of seeing the connections within your workspace. It's good, but obviously if you have a large workspace, it's hard to see where your connections are. However, now I can choose to show and pan to where my next connection is. So here I don't see attribute creator 3 on my canvas. So I'll go ahead and select that, and my screen will automatically pan to it. Next, we have the string replacer. So if you've worked with a lot of attributes before, you'll know sometimes you need to string multiple string replacers together to get the same result. However, now with this new string replacer, you can do multiple string replacements directly within a single transformer. So this really reduces the need to have a lot of string replacers together. We'll take a look at what this could look like. So here we have two examples of JSON, and all we're doing is replacing this railroad D1 with railroad with a date, and then the dates decrease as it goes on. Before, this would require 4 string replacers, but I'll show you in the next demo how we can do this all in one. So let's take a look here. So this was my previous workspace. Here we have 4 string replacers all together. If I take a look, this is just the JSON you saw in the previous slide. So each one is doing that single string replacement. I can open it up and show you how it looks until we finally get to the last one where all the strings are replaced. Now with this new string replacer, I can add this to the canvas and I can choose to do this all in one transformer. So this is what the new one looks like. You can choose your attribute and the text to replace and the replacement text just like you would in a single string replacer. But now you can have multiple string replacements. They'll be fired off sequentially. So let's say your second replacement requires something to be done on your first. You can do that directly within this transformer as well. So it's just a very easy way to do all your string replacements. I'll go forward here and I'll show you what the full string replacer looks like. So from here, if we open it up, we can see all 4 string replacements. Next, let's talk about optional input ports. So something that always confused users is once they add something like a feature reader to the canvas, they would need something like a creator or another transformer to initiate it. Now, not everyone likes that. Maybe you just want to kick off your workspace with that feature reader. It's now possible to do so within FME. So as you can see, the top HTTP caller, this is our old behavior. This HTTP caller will not run because it's not connected to another object. But now with this new behavior, once you add something like a feature reader, once you add that to the canvas, it can run just like that. So this allows you to choose how you use FME, whether you still want to use the old method of adding the creator, you can do that, or you can have it run all on its own. All right, and now that's everything I had. So I'll pass it off to Crystal to talk about the external browser authentication within FME Form.
Thanks, Sienna. So with the release of FME 2025.2, we're going to be moving away from the embedded browser for authentication. And instead, we're going to be using your default browser for any OAuth 2 authorization code compliant web services and connections, as well as for any SAML-based FME flow connections. This shift to using an external browser for authentication has 2 main benefits. So first, it does enable FME users to select their preferred browser for authentication in FME form. And it also enhances the alignment of FME with the current best practices for data and system security. So if you have already started using FME 2025.2, you may have noticed that many web services do have a new redirect strategy parameter. In this latest version of FME form, there are currently 3 options for that redirect strategy. The first is the loopback interface redirect, which is just the top image on the right here. So the loopback interface typically uses the local host, which is a special address that directs back to your own machine. This allows FME to receive a response from the web browser after you log into a target service. So many modern web service providers and APIs intended for desktop or native applications support localhost as a valid redirect URI. The second is proxy redirect. So this is just the bottom image on the right. And this redirect strategy, users can log into their web service provider through an external browser, and then the service provider will redirect the response to a safe hosted redirect page, which then relays the response to FME form, which allows the authentication process to complete. So this strategy can be particularly useful when localhost is not supported or is unavailable for handling redirects. And then lastly, we have the embedded browser. So prior to FME Form 2025.2, this was the only available redirect strategy. So if you have previously authenticated any web connections in 2025.1 or earlier, you will be familiar with the embedded browser redirect strategy. Although this redirect strategy is currently available, it is considered deprecated, meaning that it will no longer receive any active development efforts, and it will be removed in an upcoming future release. So we do highly encourage you not to create any new web connections with the deprecated embedded browser, and to migrate your older web service definitions to a redirect strategy that does utilize the external browser authentication. There is a really great article that goes into more detail that won't be covered in this webinar, and it does outline steps for migrating your connections. So the article is linked on this slide, and I will also share it in the chat here. Next, I'll go over a short demo on how to authenticate the SharePoint web connection using the new external browser. I'll start with bringing up my web service definition for SharePoint. So first, you do want to make sure that the system default browser is specified. If you have already built a web service definition from Microsoft SharePoint Online in an older version of FME, you will see something similar to this, where the embedded browser redirect strategy has been automatically set. Since this includes the redirect strategy parameter, it would support the new external browser for authentication. So if we take a look at the redirect strategy parameter, we can see that we have 3 different options. So if we click on proxy redirect, it will automatically set a redirect URI. Then if we select loopback interface, it will change the redirect URI again to this localhost redirect URI. So you may need to copy the redirect URI from this web service and then paste that value into the client registrations list of approved redirect URIs. So for this demo, since I'm using the SharePoint web service, I do want to make sure that I add localhost for loopback interface to the redirect URIs list in the Azure app registration. After this, you want to select Apply on the web service definition to apply those changes. So now we can test this. So if we go down to the bottom, we can select Test, and then that will open an external browser. So I selected Test on my own SharePoint web service definition, and I brought the external browser back to this window here. So if I select on one of my accounts to authenticate, So we can see we now have a pop-up saying that the user is authorized for the SharePoint Online web service. And if we click OK, there's another pop-up just to say that the test was successful. That was a short demo on how to use the external browser authentication for web services, but more detailed steps for migrating from an embedded browser to an external browser can be found in the article I shared earlier. So a few things to keep in mind. You do need to be using FME Form 2025.2 or above to use an external browser for authentication. And then just a note on compatibility here as well. In order to connect to Flow through SAML from Form 2025.2, a minimum Flow version of 2025.2 is also required. Next, you do want to make sure that you also have a default browser already specified. And lastly, as mentioned previously, as of FME 2025.2, the embedded browser will be considered deprecated. So we do highly encourage you not to create any new web connections with that embedded browser redirect strategy. And we encourage you to migrate any existing web service definitions to a redirect strategy that does utilize the external browser authentication. I have also linked the part of our article that outlines the steps for migrating OAuth web services and connections just on this slide here. I will now pass it off to Elizabeth to wrap things up.
Thank you, Crystal, and the entire team. Wow, those demos were incredible. It was great to see everyone reacting with the emojis as we went along there. Glad to see that everyone's as excited about these updates as I am and as the team is. So by way of conclusion, and before we get into our question period, which now is a great time to remind everyone, please, if you have yet to do so, if you had any questions that came to mind for the team, please don't be shy. Drop those in the questions tab on the bottom right. We are just a few minutes away from our live question period. But to wrap us up here, we hope that today you saw at least one update and thought, wait, I didn't know FME could do that. We hope you learned some practical tips that you can explore and use right away in your own workflows. Thank you for spending the time with us, and thanks to our safers once again for sharing their favorite picks. If you're newer to SAFE, I just want to point out that we've been in the data integration game for over 30 years, working with over 200,000 users worldwide across over 25,000 organizations. And we are also the only all data NEI platform. We work with all data velocities, locations, types, and any AI technology. Some resources to help you get started after today's webinar. The team has put together this list. Some of these might look familiar, as I know the team shared a couple of these during their segments, but I just wanted to pull everything together for you on one slide here. And you're more than welcome to download the deck under apps and handouts, and then you'll be able to actually click into these links directly as well. At SAFE, we're all about free resources. I'd encourage you to check out our academy. It is home to free instructor-led training, as well as our webinar program. We have over 400 webinars available on demand, as well as lots upcoming. So definitely check those out and see if there's any you would be interested in registering for. In terms of next steps to take here today, contact us. We'd love to help you get started with anything that you might be facing data-wise that we can help you with, info@safe.com. And then we also have a new onboarding guide available. So if you're newer to FME, we have a QR code on the screen here. You're welcome to take a look at it. Sometimes it's difficult to know where to get started. And so we created this to help guide you through. And then as well, I would certainly recommend the FME Accelerator course. It's 90 minutes free of charge, and it's a great place to learn some hands-on basics of FME. We also have a community badge code that you can redeem as a thank you for joining us today. If you do redeem these badge codes in the community, it's a fun way just to track your webinar involvement. As well, if you aren't a member of the community or if you haven't heard about it much yet before, it's a great place to network with other users as well as various FME experts that are active on the community. All right, and with that, I will invite the team to join me back on stage here and we can take a look over the questions together. And sorry, I just dropped that community badge code in the chat. Okay, so any questions that we might want to get started with, team?
Yeah, I
Thanks
can
everyone for
start.
dropping questions.
Yeah, there's a great question from Adam about the dynamic parameters and what it's like to set that up, particularly if stream data needs to be enabled when the workspace is published and running it in the repository. Is there anything else that needs to be set up? Nope, there is nothing else. Once you've created that helper workspace that is feeding the JSON configuration into your Flow app, that's all you need. And just something to clarify, the data streaming service is what you will be running the workspace under. So apart from job submitter or data download, this one is specifically the data streaming. So that's the way you want to go with that.
There's one I do want to bring up. It's more of a suggestion from German Gonzalez.
Okay.
So he said it would be very useful to distinguish when a transformer has annotated parameters. And yeah, that's a very useful idea and something we can definitely implement in the future. But it's also just something I kind of want to bring across as well. So if there's any users out there that want to share their insights and you have ideas, to submit them through the community. So we want to hear your guys' perspective as well, because it's very important. You just have a unique perspective of using FME. So yeah, if you have any ideas, whatever transformer you're working with, always submit them on the community. We definitely take your feedback into consideration.
Awesome. Okay, any others? We might want to check on. Yeah, it looks like German's got a lot of upvotes, so that's great. Great feedback. Looks like.
I did want to address the Python ID integration. So Martin asked if debugging is on the roadmap. Yes, we do not have it on the roadmap as of now, but we do recommend adding any feedback or anything that you would like to see more with the external editor on the community. And if there's enough engagement or demand, our developers will consider more options into this integration. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, I think the questions are starting to slow down here. But any others, like from the ones we have covered, that we want to bring to the stage team, or are we pretty well covered at this point?
Yes, totally. The initiator on the feature reader is now optional. I believe that came out in 25.2. Does anyone else know? So if you're not seeing that, that's probably why.
I also think it was 25.2.
Okay, we'll go with that. But yeah, if you're not seeing it, that's probably why.
Oh yeah, Glenn just clarified he has 25.1, so that sounds like that's going to be.
Okay, perfect. And Andrea, she's a product manager. She's in the comments and confirmed it was 25.2.
Perfect. Okay. Now's a good time to mention as well, just while the team's doing a final scan through the questions. If you do have a question that comes up after we have wrapped up the webinar, just to note, I will keep things running until at least the end of the hour. So feel free to drop them in the questions tab and we'll either be able to type back a response at that point, or we'll always follow up by email if there's anything that we don't get to today. But yeah, any others, team? I think now we've gotten to them all. at this point anyway. But final call in case I'm missing any. No? Okay. All right, well, with that in mind, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone so much for their time, the whole audience, for taking the time to join us today. We hope you got a lot of value out of today's content. And to our whole presenting panel, all 5 of you, thank you so much for taking the time to put this webinar together and share it with our audience today. We hope you all have a great rest of your day. And if you do have a brief moment to fill out our webinar survey, I think it's 2 or 3 multiple choice questions that are required as part of it. So really quick one. Yeah, we appreciate any feedback. It helps us improve our program. And I just dropped the link to that in the chat once again. All right, thanks everyone. And we'll see you on the next webinar. Bye for now.